So if you buy a toaster, right, and you take it home and it suddenly starts shooting sparks all across your kitchen counter, there is a very clear binary system in place for that.
Right, yeah. You get a product recall.
Exactly. A government agency issues a recall, the product gets pulled from the shelves of every big box store, and, the problem is solved.
Yep.
And you naturally expect that same level of clear-cut consumer protection when you walk into a medical clinic.
You definitely do. I mean, the expectation is absolute. If a medical professional is using like a high-tech laser on your body, the default assumption is that the machine has been rigorously tested
Yeah, of course.
and that it's explicitly approved by regulators for exactly the procedure you're paying for.
But when you look at the booming global industry of vaginal rejuvenation devices, you realize there is a massive legal loophole in modern medicine.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge blind spot.
So today we're exploring one highly specific question, which is what does off-label actually mean? Because when you look at glossy cosmetic clinic brochures promising a 5-minute miracle for vaginal tightening, and you compare those against severe safety warnings from the FDA and the UK's MHRA, it becomes clear that the safety net we all rely on is incredibly complicated.
What's fascinating here is the tension between rapid medical innovation and regulatory safety. Millions of women experience issues like vaginal dryness, pain during sex, or urinary incontinence, particularly after childbirth or as they navigate menopause.
Right. It's incredibly common.
It is. And in response, an absolutely massive global industry of laser devices has sprung up to treat those exact symptoms.
Yet, at the exact same time, clinics are heavily promoting these devices, government regulators are actively issuing severe safety warnings. The disconnect is wild.
It really is.
So before we can understand why these are used off-label, let's establish what these machines actually are. We are talking about energy-based devices, or EBDs.
Right. The most common ones utilize carbon dioxide, so CO2 lasers or erbium lasers, and some use radio frequency. If you've looked into this at all, you might recognize brand names like Mona Lisa Touch, Femilift, or Thermova.
And the claims in the marketing materials are just sweeping.
Oh, yeah. They promise the world.
They offer a 5 to 15-minute, totally painless, non-surgical treatment. They claim to cure GSM genitourinary syndrome of menopause, tackle stress urinary incontinence, and completely reverse vaginal laxity, all basically in a lunch break.
Which sounds amazing, right?
Yeah.
But the biological theory behind how they achieve this is rooted in how tissue responds to trauma. Yeah, so as estrogen levels drop, particularly during menopause, the vaginal tissues naturally thin out. They lose their moisture, their elasticity, and their robust blood supply.
Okay.
These lasers are designed to target the water inside the cells of that thinning tissue. By delivering highly focused energy, the laser creates a controlled thermal injury.
A thermal injury.
Right, it's essentially a microscopic wound to the vaginal wall.
Okay, let's unpack this. You have thinning, sensitive tissue, and the solution is to intentionally inflict thermal damage. That sounds completely counterintuitive.
It really does sound counterintuitive, but it leverages the body's own survival mechanisms. The microinjury forces a natural healing response to kick in.
Oh, so it's trying to heal the new damage.
Exactly. The trauma triggers the tissue to remodel itself. It stimulates cells called fibroblasts to produce fresh collagen and elastin.
Wow.
And more importantly, it encourages neovascularization.
Which means building new blood vessels.
Spot on. The body literally builds a new network of blood vessels to heal the wound, which in turn restores moisture, thickness, and elasticity to the area.
So mechanically, it's operating a lot like microneedling for the face. You cause microscopic damage to the epidermis to force collagen production and smooth out wrinkles. But in this case, it's an internal application using thermal energy instead of physical needles.
It relies on the exact same biological principle, yeah. Controlled injury leading to rejuvenation. And actually, for years, the primary application for CO2 lasers was in dermatology, for that precise reason, resurfacing facial skin.
So if clinics are advertising this as a highly effective miracle cure, and some of the clinical data shows an 80% patient satisfaction rate, what is the problem? Why are regulators stepping in?
Well, the problem lies buried in the fine print of regulatory approval, which brings us to the core of the off-label concept.
Okay, let's get into it.
When a regulatory body, like the FDA in the US or the MHRA in the UK, clears a medical device, They don't just approve the machine to be used however a doctor sees fit. They approve it for a very specific indication.
Got it. So the official on-label approval for these specific CO2 and erbium lasers is incredibly narrow.
Extremely narrow.
They are cleared strictly as general gynecological tools to destroy abnormal or precancerous cervical or vaginal tissue or to remove genital warts.
That's the baseline. The FDA looked at the data and said, yes, this laser is safe and effective for burning away genital warts.
Wait, if a clinic uses a laser to treat vaginal dryness when it was only approved to destroy warts, is that illegal?
This is the crazy part. Because of the way medical licensing works, it is not illegal for the doctor to do it. Really, once a drug or a device is approved by the FDA for one thing, doctors have the legal right to prescribe it or use it for another totally different purpose as long as they believe it is medically appropriate for the patient sitting in front of them.
So that is the definition of off-label use.
Exactly.
But that seems like an incredibly broad loophole. I mean, a device approved to vaporize a wart is fundamentally doing a different job than a device being used to gently stimulate collagen across the entire vaginal canal.
It is broad, but off-label use is actually a foundational part of modern medicine. According to sources like the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the AMCP, we wouldn't have many modern treatments without it. Take cardiovascular stents, for example. They were originally only FDA approved to prop open arteries. But vascular surgeons realized, purely through practice, that they could also use them off-label to successfully open closed veins.
Oh, right. And Botox is the classic example of this. It was originally just an obscure treatment for eye spasms.
Exactly. Doctors noticed that the patients getting Botox for eye spasms were losing their wrinkles around the eye. So dermatologists started using Botox off-label for wrinkles.
That's wild.
Yeah, and they did that legally for 10 years before the manufacturer finally got official FDA approval for cosmetic use. Medical practice simply moves much faster than the bureaucratic process of regulatory approval.
But if Botox eventually got the official cosmetic label, why don't these laser manufacturers just get the official label for vaginal rejuvenation?
Because of the massive financial and logistical hurdles. Running a multi-year, multi-center, double-blind clinical trial to satisfy the FDA costs tens of millions of dollars.
Right, of course.
So if you are a device manufacturer and doctors are already legally allowed to buy your laser and use it off-label, what is your financial incentive to spend $50 million just to change the wording on your official approval document?
There isn't one. The machine is already selling. But there has to be a restriction somewhere in this pipeline.
The restriction falls entirely on the marketing. While doctors are legally allowed to use the device off-label, the manufacturers of the device are strictly prohibited from marketing it for off-label uses.
Ah, I see.
The company making the laser cannot legally advertise that it cures vaginal dryness or laxity if they only have clearance for treating warts.
But because manufacturers couldn't legally advertise this, cosmetic clinics and medical spas started making wild claims online to fill the gap.
Exactly.
They bought the machines for $100,000, realized they needed to recoup the cost, and started heavily promoting designer vagina treatments. That aggressive marketing blitz caught the FDA's attention, and the hammer came down hard in 2018.
It really did. The FDA issued a major safety communication. The FDA commissioner at the time, Scott Gottlieb, stated publicly that the agency was deeply concerned women were being harmed by these unapproved uses.
And the adverse events reported to the FDA's MIU database, which tracks medical device issues, were severe. Women weren't just complaining that the treatment didn't work.
No, they were reporting serious trauma, vaginal burns, severe scarring, pain during sexual intercourse, and chronic recurring pain.
And it wasn't just the United States sounding the alarm.
No, this triggered a global regulatory crackdown. In Australia, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, or TGA, conducted a massive post-market review. They concluded there was simply insufficient clinical evidence to support the long-term safety and performance of these devices for rejuvenation.
And the TGA actually canceled all energy-based devices intended for vaginal rejuvenation from their registry.
They did. If a laser had multiple uses, the manufacturer is forced to update the instructions to explicitly exclude vaginal rejuvenation.
Wow. Meanwhile, the UK's NICE guidelines concluded that the long-term evidence is totally inadequate and recommended that transvaginal laser therapy should be restricted solely to research settings.
Right. You have a situation where regulatory bodies across multiple continents are looking at the exact same data and coming to the exact same conclusion.
Yeah.
The safety profile for this specific use case is not established.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Consumers are still walking into high-end clinics today and receiving these treatments, paying $500 to $1,000 a session for a treatment that regulatory bodies are actively warning against or outright banning.
Yeah, the clinics are not backing down, which means the doctors on the ground strongly disagree with the regulators.
They absolutely disagree. Proponents of the technology, like the Women's Health Clinic in the UK and organizations like the Vaginal Erbium Laser Academy, argue that the FDA's report is much too broad and lacks sensitivity.
Their defense rests on the fact that CO2 lasers have a 35-year track record of safe use in surgery and dermatology.
Right.
Their technical argument is very specific. They state that the thermal heat generated by these lasers in the vaginal canal doesn't exceed 45 to 60 degrees Celsius.
Okay, so it's controlled.
Exactly. Because of that temperature ceiling, proponents argue that the risk of severe thermal damage is practically illusory, provided the machine is operated on the correct settings.
And major medical bodies have spoken up in defense of the lasers. The European Urogynecological Association and the British Menopause Society have published consensus statements supporting laser therapy as a safe, viable option.
Which brings us to the ethical dilemma of why this off-label use is so fiercely defended by clinicians. For many postmenopausal women experiencing severe vaginal atrophy, the gold standard treatment is localized estrogen cream.
But consider a breast cancer survivor. Many breast cancer tumors are hormonally driven, meaning those women are strictly advised against taking any estrogen therapies.
Exactly. For a breast cancer survivor suffering from debilitating GSM, a non-hormonal option like a laser isn't a vanity project. It might be the only available avenue to reclaim her quality of life and sexual health.
So taking that option off the table because of a blanket regulatory warning has massive quality of life implications.
It does. So if the laser itself is theoretically safe at those temperatures and is providing crucial relief to breast cancer survivors, how do we explain the burns and scarring reported to the FDA?
Right, that's the big question.
The clinics argue the real danger isn't the laser technology itself. The danger is the practitioner wielding it.
Yes, Ali Dilks, the clinical director at the Women's Health Clinic, called it complete and utter madness to allow non-medical aesthetic professionals to insert laser heads inside a woman's vagina for so-called designer vagina treatments.
The clinical community is furious that everyday beauty therapists with zero gynecological background or anatomical training are legally allowed to perform these treatments in strip mall med spas.
I mean, if you hand a highly complex tissue ablating laser to someone who doesn't understand the nuance of vaginal mucosa, complications are inevitable.
But the regulators don't differentiate between a board-certified urogynecologist and a med spa technician when they issue these broad warnings. This raises an important question, right?
Yeah, it does.
When the FDA states that the safety of a device hasn't been evaluated, the general public reads that as, this device is dangerous. But clinically, it just means the rigorous, long-term, sham-controlled randomized trials haven't been completed yet.
And we should clarify why sham-controlled trials for devices are so incredibly difficult to execute compared to drug trials.
Oh, it's a completely different ballgame. If you are testing a new pill, it's easy to give half the patients the real drug and half the patients a sugar pill. But how do you do a placebo test for a surgical laser?
You would literally have to bring a patient in, put them in stirrups, insert the laser probe, make the machine beep but deliver zero thermal energy.
Yes.
And the patient has to somehow not realize they got the fake treatment.
It is a logistical and ethical nightmare. Getting institutional review boards to approve sham surgeries or sham laser insertions is incredibly difficult, heavily restricted, and massively expensive.
Which explains why the high-quality, long-term data regulators want simply doesn't exist yet. It's a fundamental clash of timelines.
Exactly. Regulatory bodies are designed to move at the speed of long-term data collection, which takes decades. But patients are experiencing painful symptoms right now.
With regulators saying stop and some doctors saying it's safe and effective, where does that leave the patient?
This clash puts the burden of choice squarely on the shoulders of the patient. If regulators are actively saying, we don't know enough yet, proceed with extreme caution, and your physician is saying, I've seen this work safely in my practice for years, navigating that gap requires a rigorous approach to informed consent.
Right, the guidelines from the doctor's company, a major medical malpractice insurer, highlight just how heavy that burden of informed consent really is for an off-label procedure. A standard sign here waiver is not enough.
Not even close. The patient must be explicitly informed that the device is being utilized in a way that fundamentally differs from its FDA-approved label.
They have to know it's off-label.
Yes. They must understand that because large-scale trials haven't been completed for this specific use, not all potential side effects are known. And, critically, they need to understand that despite what the clinic's marketing brochure implies, result cannot be guaranteed.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this deep dive? If you are ever offered an off-label treatment, whether it's a laser, a drug, or a supplement, you have to ask questions.
Definitely.
Is this backed by a formal clinical study, or is this a cosmetic trend? What happens if there's a complication?
Because if a complication does occur, the manufacturer of the device can point to their on-label approval and say, "We never told anyone to use it that way."
The liability falls entirely on the clinician who chose to use it off-label and the patient who consented to it. It's a double-edged sword.
It really is. Off-label use acts like an innovator's loophole in the medical system. It is a necessary backdoor for doctors trying to save a patient who has run out of options.
Like off-label pediatric prescribing or oncology treatments when no approved drugs exist.
Exactly. But that same backdoor is left wide open for profit-driven clinics to aggressively market unproven cosmetic cures to vulnerable patients long before definitive safety data is in.
The world of vaginal rejuvenation perfectly encapsulates the wild west of off-label medical devices. It's a space where cutting-edge tech, desperate patients, and cautious regulators collide.
In looking ahead, policing this innovator's loophole is only going to become more complex. Based on NHS guidelines about digital health tools, the definition of a medical device is expanding rapidly.
Oh, right, beyond physical hardware.
Yes. We've talked about heat-generating lasers operated by professionals in physical clinics. But today, medical devices include digital health tools. They include home-use tech, AI symptom checkers on your phone, and smartwatches monitoring your heart rhythm.
Wow. If regulatory bodies, like the FDA and the MHRA, are already struggling to police how doctors use physical lasers off-label in professional clinics, if they are struggling with physical clinics,
How on earth will they regulate the off-label use of digital health algorithms and connected devices sitting right in our own living rooms?
that is a wild thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions about the treatments you're offered and the technology you trust, and we'll catch you next time.